Hello, Duke fans. Welcome in to the Duke Blue Devils Insider Podcast, your daily podcast for all things Duke Blue Devils news. Just like every day, we thank you so much for tuning into the show today to get your latest on the Duke Blue Devils. My name is Hugh Strain, your daily host, as well as beat writer at Duke Blue Devils on SI. Happy to chat with you guys today and every single day. So, as we've been talking about all week long, the Duke Blue Devils are gearing up for its regular season finale and revenge opportunity against the number 17 ranked North Carolina Tar Heels. Duke has already inked the outright ACC regular season title as well as the 1 seed in the ACC tournament. Duke is currently 28-2 overall, 16-1 in league play. North Carolina has locked in the 4 seed at 24-6 overall and 12-5 in league play. So both teams get the double bye. As we talked about on a pod earlier this week, and I also wrote a story about this on si.com/college/Duke. So go check that out. If Duke and North Carolina both win one game in the ACC tournament next week, again, that starts on March 10th, Duke and North Carolina will meet for the second year in a row in the ACC tournament. We talked about that on yesterday's show. Also, go check us out at si.com/college/Duke. But major breaking news around Duke versus North Carolina tomorrow, and really in the grand scheme of things for North Carolina all season long. UNC star freshman forward Caleb Wilson has been ruled out not only for tomorrow's matchup against the Blue Devils at Cameron Indoor Stadium, but for the remainder of the season. This was reported on Friday afternoon on March 6th, kind of out of nowhere. On Thursday, Hubert Davis hinted that Caleb Wilson might play, said nothing was definite. He wasn't cleared for 5-on-5 at that time, but there was nothing, going against him potentially playing. Obviously, we know how serious it is now. This is according to ESPN Shams Charania, quote, Justin, North Carolina's Caleb Wilson broke his right thumb in a non-contact drill in practice Thursday and has undergone season-ending surgery, sources tell ESPN. Wilson is expected to be cleared during the NBA pre-draft process. He'll compete to be the number 1 pick in June. Obviously, major breaking news out of the North Carolina program. Caleb Wilson will now be out for the remainder of the 2025-26 college basketball season. He has missed the 6 games for the Tar Heels already, and UNC has won 5 of those games. They've been very solid without him, which, surprising to say. So hard to go against what their ceiling can be even without him. But obviously, such a tough loss for a team that was really riding high and had potential to be a dark horse sort of contender in the ACC tournament on the season. Caleb Wilson averaging 19.8 points, 9.4 rebounds, 2.7 assists, 1.4 blocks, and 1.5 steals a night on 57.8% shooting from the floor. Leads the Tar Heels in points, rebounds, steals, and blocks. He's one of the most athletic guys in all of college basketball at 6'10" and 215 pounds, a jump out of the gym type of player. One of the most athletic, one of the most exciting to watch players in college basketball. And obviously, this has a major, major effect on Duke versus North Carolina at Cameron Indoor Stadium. Duke actually opened up as 15.5-point favorites on some sports books before this Caleb Wilson news. Obviously, you got to think that line is going to go up, but obviously, this will pay major dividends in that game. First time around against Duke, Caleb Wilson goes for 23 points, was held fairly in check in the second half, did most of his production in the first half. But nonetheless, obviously such a key piece and a huge part of a North Carolina front court that was one of the best in all of college basketball. The 2-man duo with Henry Vasar and Caleb Wilson was one of the most effective front court duos really in the entire country. Before Wilson got hurt, it was a top 5 team in the country in terms of opponent 2-point defensive percentage. And now, obviously, that's dropped a bit with Caleb Wilson's absence, because he's an elite shot blocker. He's got really active hands, and he can guard so many different positions on the floor. But Henry Vasar has still been really effective in his absence. But you have to think this changes things completely for the matchup tomorrow, because it really felt like the reason Duke fell out of that game was after Pat Gungba fouled out. Pat Gungba fouled out with about 6 minutes left, just over 6 minutes to go in that ball game. Duke proceeded to get outscored by North Carolina 16-6 across the remainder of that ball game to fall 71-68, obviously off a Seth Trimble buzzer beater 3. But it was a game that Duke controlled really the entire way leading up to the final few minutes. Duke held double-digit leads in both halves, and really looked like the better team on both sides of the ball until it's really only true 5-man Pat Gungba fouled out. And obviously that put Duke in an extremely difficult spot. But now North Carolina will be without arguably, most likely, its best player and one of the most electric players in all of college basketball, Caleb Wilson, a double machine. And how this really affects North Carolina is how in the world is it going to handle Duke's length? It just doesn't have the unit at this point to match, a three-man group of Cameron Boozer, Pat Gungba, and Malik Brown. Over the last few games in Wilson's absence, Zayden High has been getting a lot of minutes, has kind of been a bright spot for the Tar Heels in his absence. He's been fairly productive in the time he's gotten on the floor, but still, not talented enough to really match a guy like Cam Boozer or Pat Gungba. Have to think that Vasar is going to be Pat Gungba's primary assignment. And check out si.com/college/Duke. We wrote a piece about why Patrick Gungba is the X factor in this game, regardless if Caleb Wilson plays or not. But just tough to imagine how North Carolina is really going to adjust to losing Caleb Wilson. Obviously, it's had success without him, but UNC really hasn't played anybody of note over the last 6 games. It won 5 of them, but in that stretch without Caleb Wilson, North Carolina won against Pitt at home. It lost on the road to NC State, a convincing loss, 82-58. It beat Syracuse on the road. It beat Louisville at home. It beat Virginia Tech at home, and it beat Clemson at home. So obviously it's winning games, but not really playing anyone of note. I think at this point, Duke is a heavy, heavy, heavy favorite to win this game and probably to win it by double digits. Just a very interesting storyline because he had been reported to be progressing towards playing in this game. And obviously it seems like this was a brand new breakthrough that no one really saw coming. He wasn't cleared for 5-on-5, but as Shams Charania reported for ESPN, this was a non-contact drill in practice. Seems like maybe a potential similar situation what happened to Seth Trimble early in the season when he had to miss several games after a weight room incident. Could have just been an accident like that. But obviously you feel for Hubert Davis and the rest of his staff and some of the injuries that they have been dealing with across the course of the season. But nonetheless, Duke now in a great position to win this game. According to KenPom, Duke projected to win 81-65, a 93% chance to win the game for Duke at home with the absence of Caleb Wilson. We'll see really for the first time what UNC's ceiling really is now, I think, because like we just said, over the last 6 games, UNC hasn't really played anybody of note. An NC State team that's really slid over the course of the back half of the regular season. UNC lost to the Wolfpack on the road by over 20 points, and it's a team that Duke handled easily. And everybody it's beaten, maybe with the exception of Louisville, just really hasn't been anyone of note. So I think really the biggest storyline in this game now is what is UNC's ceiling in the absence of Caleb Wilson? Can they be, a potential second weekend contender at all? Can they still be a dark horse team? Because against Clemson, again, Clemson, another team that really slid over the back half of the season, looked like the second best team in the ACC for a good part of it. And then over the back half, a conference play was not that great. And UNC only took down Clemson by 4 at home. And it took a pretty incredible performance from freshman Luka Bogovac from Montenegro. He goes for 20 points on 6 of 10 from the 3-point range, the most threes any UNC player has hit in a game all season long. So very, very interesting to see how this UNC team reacts to obviously potentially the best team in college basketball in Duke now without its best player. I understand they've been without their best player, but this is by far and away the toughest team that UNC will face, especially on the road against a Duke team that, like we just said, one of the best teams, if not the best team in all of college basketball. Duke is 14-0 at home this season, looking to finish with a perfect record with a win over UNC. Duke still controls its own destiny at this point in terms of getting the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. Duke is currently the projected top overall seed. And again, just really hard to see any team beating Duke at this point of the season out of the ACC. Duke has won its last 7 games by an average margin of 23.4 points since that UNC loss, and it hasn't allowed any opponent over that stretch to score 65 points or more in a game. Feels like Duke is just so far and away the best team out of the ACC. Obviously, if it goes on to win its 2nd ACC title and a tournament title in a row and its 3rd in 4 years under John Shire, you have to think Duke is a lock to take on that number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. But nonetheless, major breaking news, UNC star freshman Caleb Wilson is out for Duke's matchup against the Tar Heels at Cameron Indoor Stadium to close out the regular season. That is going to do it for us here today at the Duke Blue Devils Insider Podcast. Just like every day, we thank you so much for tuning into the show today. Make sure to check us out at si.com/college/Duke every single day to get your latest on the Duke Blue Devils. My name is Hugh Strain, your daily host, as well as beat writer at Duke Blue Devils on SI, and I'll see you tomorrow.